Hi everyone, welcome back to Journeying with Janay, where we turn pain into purpose. Today is our second episode, and I've decided to do something before we get into the meat of the matter of this episode. Every episode, we will do something now called the Janay Fact. At the beginning, you will learn something new about me, and as each episode unfolds, you get to know more about the person that you're actually taking the journey with. So, today's Janay Fact is that I'm a huge LeBron James fan. I love basketball, but I love LeBron James even more. He's my favorite basketball player. Um, everybody always say, well, you love basketball. Do you have a favorite basketball team? And I'm like, nope. Wherever LeBron goes, I go. We're a package deal. So, and in my eyes, he can do no wrong. He's perfect, which is a great segue into today's episode. So, if as you probably already seen, the title of today's episode is The Side Effects of Perfectionism. So, as we delve into today's episode, we're going to talk about just what perfectionism is and why this is something that I chose to talk about. So, first, perfectionism. When we look at perfectionism, the root word is perfect. So, in my research for today's episode, I looked up what perfect meant. And perfect has a few definitions, but there were three that really stuck out to me that I wanted to discuss with you all on today's episode. So, the first definition of perfect is exactly fitting the need in a certain situation or for a certain purpose. The second definition is entirely without any flaws, defects, or shortcomings. And the last definition of perfect is excellent or complete, beyond practical or theoretical. So when we think about perfect, or which is the root word of perfectionism, we got to this episode today because I am a perfectionist. I've noticed, especially parents out there, your children observe what you do and how you do it, and that's the way they end up going into life. So in my home, my parents always demanded greatness, pushed me to meet my potential, and sometimes even to exceed it. But they never, ever, ever demanded me to be perfect. But seeing my father and my brother especially, they always demanded perfectionism for themselves. So like I said, going back to your as a parent with children, your children see what you do. They, of course, they hear what you say, but most of all, they see what you do. So when they see you being a perfectionist and that you hold yourself to such a high standard, they want to be one. So before we kind of get into how perfectionism affects me, I want to talk about someone who we all know and love, and now we sadly miss after the untimely tragic death of Kobe Bryant and his daughter Gigi Bryant, which we send our prayers to his family. But when I was thinking about someone being a perfectionist and perfectionism, I automatically thought the first person I thought about was Kobe Bryant. And some people might say that's funny because I just told you with the Janay fact that my favorite basketball player is LeBron James. But the first person I thought about is Kobe, because everything that we seen him model in his career, but especially since his untimely passing, everybody talks about his need to be perfect and how he always wanted to be perfect. So when I thought about him and thought about this episode, I started doing some research on him, and there was 4 points that really stuck out to me. So the first point was, I was watching one of the last interviews he did with Matt Barnes for his podcast, and Kobe spoke about how even in his home, everything was always so competitive with his dad and with his cousins and his sisters. Even the simple thing is video games or playing a game with family, it was always competitive. And he said, and this is a direct quote from Kobe, my family talked a lot of shit and they demanded perfectionism. And they were always so competitive. And I seen that growing up, so I wanted to be like that. So that brings us back to what I said about me observing in my own home how my parents were and how my brother was, who they held themselves to such a high regard and had almost no margin for error, which almost seems realistic. So just like I said in my home, Kobe seen that in his home. And I'm going to pause right here because the title is The Side Effects of Perfectionism. So when we automatically think side effect, we think of, okay, I'm going to take this medicine and this medicine is going to have an adverse reaction, and that is a side effect. And yes, that is truly side effect when we first think about it. But in my research, I noticed that you can have good and bad effects from things that happen. So one of the things with being a perfectionist, I find that worked for Kobe in his professional life is that perfectionism. And we all know it as the Mamba mentality, the work ethic, to work hard, to never give up, to always challenge yourself, to be the best that you can be. We all know that Mamba mentality that he had, that he passed on to his daughter, especially with her playing basketball. So when we think about that Mamba mentality and working hard, it is a good effect that comes from perfectionism, because as a perfectionist, you always want to work the hardest that you possibly can so you can get the best result, which may not always lead to being perfect, but it'll lead to being great. So in Kobe's professional life, his perfectionism really helped him in him being a perfectionist. So the second point that I want to make about him, as I was listening to the interview, I heard Matt Barnes tell him how when he was playing at UCLA and Kobe had just got to the Lakers, he remembered it was a time when Kobe hurt his right hand, which is his shooting hand. But that Kobe went to UCLA's gym and practiced for hours taking shots with his left hand. Now, for the ordinary person who maybe didn't care about their performance or what have you, they wouldn't have spent hours in the gym to perfect a left-handed shot because they're actually right-handed, but Kobe did. So that's another good effect from his perfectionism. The third one that I want to mention is him being not only a perfectionist in his professional career, but being it in his personal life. So much so that he got up at 4 o'clock every morning to work out just to make sure he had the time to drop his girls off at school and pick them up. And he stated that one of his first times doing it, he was a little late and they got on him about it. And that from that time on, he made sure he was never late again. So for this man who's traveling all over the world, playing games, having to train, having to practice, he still made the sacrifice to make sure not only that he dropped his daughters off, not only that he picked them up from school, but that he was on time, which goes back into perfectionism. So there's another good effect. And the fourth thing that I want to talk about, when I was listening to the interview, he said that his original goal coming into the NBA was to win 8 championships. Now, most people who love and play basketball can't even get into the NBA. The slim amount that do, they vie just to win 1 championship and work so hard. But he wanted to win 8. And as we all know, Kobe only won 5. So going back to one of the definitions that I told you of perfect, it says entirely without flaws, defects, or shortcomings. So for him, in his mind, even though he won 5 and that was amazing, he still was shooting for that 8. So he was a little short, or he had a shortcoming for not having that 8, for not getting to those 8 championships and attaining those 8 rings. But when we look at Kobe's life, we see that being a perfectionist actually helped him in his professional and in his personal life to be the great person that he is. Now, to switch gears a little bit, of course, I have not accomplished nowhere near the things that Kobe Bryant has. I'm just starting on my journey, but I want to let you know how perfectionism has affected me. So at the beginning of this episode, we talked about what I seen growing up in my home. And I seen them being perfect and never giving themselves much margin for error. And when I say that, I mean like this much. They never gave themselves much margin for error at all. They always made sure that what they did, they gave their all. And my dad has this saying that when he preaches, I don't leave anything in the locker room. I leave it all on the floor because I never know when it's going to be my last time. And that sticks with me all the time. So anytime I'm doing something, whether I'm decorating, whether I'm recording videos for you guys, I give it my all. And the finished product that you all see, I've probably recorded about 30 of them because that perfectionism kicks in and be like, this wasn't right. You stumble right here. You bumble right here. You didn't do this right. And it kicks in. So we talked about some of the good things with Kobe and with his professional life and personal. So let's talk about some of the good things with me. So being an event planner, you have to stay on top of everything, especially if it's a wedding. This is the biggest day of someone's life. You have to make sure everything is in order, all vendors are taken care of, everything is moving timely. So you have to make sure that all that done. So me being a perfectionist, it definitely works to my advantage. I'm always able to be right there, get everything that I need done. It's always in my head, or I have a list, which I have today, a list of things that I wanted to say so I didn't forget anything. I always make lists and I always make plans. So to a perfectionist, most of the time a plan, they go hand in hand. You have to have a plan in order to be perfect. So it works for me in my professional life. It works for me with school because I have a plan. But with school, it's kind of a two-headed coin for me, because I got to this place that I wanted to be so perfect. And when I was in secondary education, I'm like, okay, I'm making A's and B's in middle school and high school. But now that I'm in college, it's a whole different ball game. And so the minute I would make a B on the exam or a project, I was literally having a full-on meltdown. Like my family could tell you, I mean, tears, ugly cry, just frustrated. And so I would always be so hard on myself because I would, just like my brother, just like my dad, very little margin of error. So with that being said, it was good and bad. But the things that I learned through therapy is, number one, being perfect is unattainable. The only perfect person to ever walk this earth, and me being a believer, is Jesus Christ. He was the only one with no flaws, no spots, no blemishes. He was perfect. He had no shortcomings, no defects. Going back to that second definition of perfect that I told you about before. So, if I know he's the only perfect person, why do I want to do everything so perfectly? Then going to therapy, my therapist had to say, Janay, that is not attainable. It's fine to have standards. It's fine to have a plan. But you have to know that it won't always all work out perfectly, because perfection is unattainable. You can strive and strive and strive as hard as you can to get to a place of perfection, but you will never truly be perfect. And so now to go to the bad effects of it, I'm like, okay, this man is telling me I'm not going to be perfect. He's busting my bubble. So I'm like, sir, I like you, but I don't like you right now, because I wanted to keep me being perfect in my head. But in all actuality, it's not a healthy way to live life. And when I say that, it's not only not healthy for you or for me as a person, but it's not healthy for the people that we're around. So I started to notice that in friendships or in relationships, that I was projecting my perfectionism onto someone else, because I gave myself very little room for error. So if I hold myself to such a high standard, if you're going to come into my life, you have to live by that same thing. And I had to stop and have a come to Jesus moment and be like, that's not even fair, because you're holding yourself to something that's unattainable and doing it to someone else when you don't even know how they feel about perfection or being perfect. You just know how you feel, and you want to hold them to that same standard. So when I sit down and I look back and I started to think about things, I'm like, okay, I can see how perfectionist has worked for me, but I can also see how it has hindered me in so many areas of my life, because I was worried about everything just being perfect. And instead of worrying about it being perfect, I should have just been worried about it being realistic. Because after all, the perfection that people try to portray is honestly just a facade, because we cannot be perfect. We will make mistakes as humans. Without mistakes, we will never learn from them, and we will never be able to grow. So going through that journey of realizing that I wasn't perfect, realizing how I project my perfection onto others, how it has damaged friendships, it has damaged relationships, I had to take a step back and start saying, okay, Janay, you're human. You're in your 20s. I'm only 23 years old. You're going to make mistakes. You're not going to be perfect. You're not going to pass every exam with an A. You're not going to get the perfection from everybody that comes into your life, whether it be romantic relationships or friendships or just everyday encounters. So you have to give yourself a break, but you also have to give others a break. So in that moment, I started working on myself, working on trying not to be perfect, working on not projecting that perfection onto others, and even having to go back and say, hey, look, I'm sorry because I expected you to be something that I can't even be myself. So in that very moment of that, I had a realization. And that realization was that the perfection is the facade, so I have to strip the facade away. And in order to strip that facade away, I have to unravel. And for a perfectionist, it's like, girl, what you mean by unravel? I can't let myself go. I can't let myself just be free with no margin of error. And I had to sit back and say, you can unravel, but it can be in a good way. Because in order to become who God has destined you to be, you have to unravel that facade, unravel that perfectionism, unravel that pride, unravel that unforgiveness, unravel everything that you have made yourself to be, and strip yourself down to the real you so I could become the real Janay. So in that moment, I said, okay, I know what I have to do next. I love to journal and I love to write. And it's one of my biggest things. It's one of my biggest healers. It's where I have most of my realizations at and my breakthroughs at, through writing it out. Because it's something about the white paper that's so sacred that I can't lie to it. I can be the stripped down version of who I am. So with saying that, there's something that I wrote that I would like to read to you guys. And I hope that it helps you deal with your perfection. I hope that it helps you unravel. But most of all, I hope that it helps you become who you're supposed to be. And the title of it is The Unraveling and the Becoming of Janay. It says, the little girl with bows in her hair who was expected to be perfect. The girl with the quick wit and fast tongue told to be more tamed. Fearful because her beliefs did not parallel what she was taught. The girl broken more times than she could count, but forced to present herself as whole. This girl began to unravel. Along with her unraveling came fear. Fear that she would not be accepted by those whom she loved the most. Fear of whom she would become once unraveled. With great hesitation and determination, she began to search the deepest parts of her soul to find the essence of who she truly was. With her core values of morality and faith woven into her very being, she set out on the journey of becoming. In her becoming, she discovered that perfection is an unattainable and non-relatable facade that others have chosen. Her quick wit and fast tongue worked to her advantage when used properly. Her unparalleled beliefs became her way of bridging a great divide. Allowing herself to display her brokenness became the quintessential thing that led her to become whole. Although her greatest fear was unraveling, her greatest triumph was overcoming that fear and becoming Janay. So today with this video, my main goal and main hope for whoever's watching is to tell you that one, it's okay to like everything in order. It's okay to want to attain a high level of success. It's okay to want whatever you do as your career to be great and want you to be great at it. And I want you to be great at it. But it is not okay for your mental, emotional, or physical health to be a perfectionist. It is not okay for your relationships, whether it be friendships or romantic, to be a perfectionist. But most of all, it is not okay for you to be a perfectionist. You are human. You don't want to walk around in a shell, being a shell of a person, trying to hold up a facade of being perfect just so people don't think that you're broken or that you're hurt or that you're flawed. You were meant to be broken. You were meant to be hurt. You were meant to be flawed. And sometimes it's okay for that brokenness to be on display. It's okay to be vulnerable enough to allow that brokenness to be on display. And as you heard me mention, I was broken more times than I could ever count. but I was forced to present myself as whole because I wasn't letting nobody in my business, or I wasn't going to be vulnerable with anybody. But once I learned to allow myself to unravel and to become Janay, I was okay with being vulnerable and displaying my brokenness, because that's how I am becoming healed. But most importantly, I am becoming whole. So on this journeying with Janay, I want you to come on that journey. I always say what we turn pain into purpose. But in order to walk into your purpose, you have to be whole. You can't depend on your parents to do it for you, your siblings to do it for you, your friends to do it for you, your boyfriend or your girlfriend to do it for you, your husband or your wife to do it for you. The only person that can do it for you is you, with the help of God. So today I challenge you to become whole. And in order to become whole, you cannot be a perfectionist, because it is a facade that is unattainable and unrelatable. So the last quote I would like to leave with you today is that all the time when I was talking about being this perfectionist and being whole, I would have curveballs constantly coming my way, whether it was my health, whether it was depression, whether it was anxiety, whether it was grief from losing people who meant the world to me. And all these curveballs came my way, but I realized I was trying to make it through those hard times being perfect. But in grief, in depression, and anxiety, that looks nothing like perfection. It looks like chaos. Your body feels like chaos. Your mind feels like chaos. Your emotions are chaotic. And one day I had to sit back and say, you know what? I have to let go of this facade of perfectionism. And I just have to worry about overcoming and getting to the next step in life. And the last quote I would like to leave with you all is something that I wrote. And it says, life will sometimes throw you curveballs. It's not about how perfect your overcoming is, only that you overcame. So today I tell you, stop trying to be perfect. Stop trying to hide your brokenness, because it will never lead you to ultimately being whole. Today I tell you to allow yourself to be broken, to heal those broken wounds, to love yourself, flaws and all, shortcomings and all, defects and all, to be practical with your life. Do not get to a place of unpracticality, because it will never happen. You have to be practical. But most of all, let go of that perfection. Allow yourself to make some mistakes. Allow yourself to know that you're human. But those mistakes that you make sure that you grow from them. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode. This is episode 2 of Journeying with Janay. Again, the title was The Side Effects of Perfectionism. So now that you know the side effects of perfectionism, I truly, truly hope that you take everything that I said today, and if you have to listen to it again, if you have to journal about it, whatever you have to do, just do it, so you can stop yourself from going through some of the things that I had to go through with dealing with perfectionism. So again, thank you all for watching, and thank you all for coming with me on my journey as we turn pain into purpose. Bye.